Have you ever wondered what enlightenment really means? For many of us, the word sounds almost mythical. We've heard stories about magical powers, eternal life, or a person so detached they feel nothing at all. Maybe you've even imagined enlightenment as some kind of escape from this messy, imperfect world. But the truth, as the Buddha taught, is far more real and in many ways more beautiful. Enlightenment is not about turning into someone else. It's not about gaining superhuman abilities or floating away into the sky. It is about waking up from confusion, from the illusions that cloud our vision, and seeing life exactly as it island. Imagine for a moment that you've been wearing glasses smudged with dirt your entire life. You didn't even know it, because you thought that blur was just normal. And then one day, you wipe them clean. Suddenly, the world looks different, sharper, clearer, more alive. That moment of clarity is a taste of what enlightenment means. It's a mind free from craving, free from anger, free from the fog of ignorance. And here's the part that might surprise you. Enlightenment isn't about escaping life. It's about living it fully. A Buddha still eats, still feels tired, still experiences pain if they stub their toe. The body doesn't become invincible, but what changes is the mind. The enlightened one doesn't add that second arrow, the story of frustration, fear, or resentment. They feel pain, but not the suffering we usually pile on top of it. Think about your own life. How often do you suffer more from the story in your head than from the situation itself? A missed appointment turns into, "I'm always failing." A harsh word from someone becomes, "Nobody respects me." That's the second arrow. Enlightenment is freedom from that second arrow. This freedom is not cold or distant. It's filled with compassion. When the fires of craving and clinging are gone, what's left is love without strings attached, joy in the happiness of others. A calm that doesn't waver when things don't go your way. It's like a lotus flower, blooming right in the middle of muddy water, untouched by the mud around it. And the best part, you don't have to wait for some distant future to touch this peace. Every small moment of letting go, every mindful breath, every act of kindness is already a step on this path. Enlightenment is not just a final destination. It's also a way of being right here, right now. So, the question is not whether enlightenment is possible. The question is, are you ready to begin? Even a single breath taken with awareness can be the first step toward a freedom deeper than words. 1. Enlightenment is seeing the truth clearly. When we hear the word enlightenment, it can sound almost mysterious, like something reserved for saints, sages, or people who spend decades in caves. But the Buddha's teaching points us to something very real, very human, and closer than we think. At its heart, enlightenment is about one thing: seeing the truth clearly. Think about how much of our suffering comes not from what actually happens, but from how we perceive it. We see life through lenses colored by craving, anger, or confusion. When someone criticizes us, we don't just hear their words, we filter them through pride, fear, or insecurity. When we want something, we don't just experience desire, we build entire stories around it. I'll only be happy if I get this. And when things don't go our way, we sink into resistance, resentment, or denial. It's like trying to drive a car with a fogged-up windshield. You can't see the road clearly, and every turn feels uncertain. Every obstacle feels bigger than it really island. Enlightenment is like wiping that windshield clean. Suddenly, the road is visible, the path is open, and even though challenges still appear, you can navigate them with clarity. This clarity is what the Buddha called direct seeing. It's not about adopting a new belief or memorizing a set of teachings. It's about experiencing reality without the distortions of greed, hatred, or ignorance. And what do we see when the fog lifts? The Four Noble Truths. We see that life contains suffering, that suffering has causes, that it can end, and that there's a path leading to that end. These are no longer ideas on a page. They become living truths, felt directly in the heart. Now, here's something to reflect on. Have you ever had a moment when a problem that seemed unbearable suddenly felt lighter? Not because the situation changed, but because your perspective shifted. Maybe you forgave someone you had carried anger toward for years. Maybe you accepted a loss and realized that peace was still possible. In those moments, the mind tasted clarity, even if just for an instant. That's a glimpse of what enlightenment points to. When the Buddha spoke of nirvana, he didn't describe it as a magical place or an escape from life. He described it as the extinguishing of inner fires, the fire of craving, the fire of aversion, and the fire of ignorance. When those fires go out, what's left is not emptiness, but a deep, quiet peace. A mind that doesn't have to fight reality anymore. And here's the powerful part. This clarity isn't reserved for monks or spiritual masters. It is available to each of us right now. Every time we notice the story our mind is spinning and gently let it go, we are practicing the art of seeing clearly. Every time we choose patience instead of anger, gratitude instead of craving, or acceptance instead of denial, we're wiping a little more fog from the glass. The Buddha once said, "Before and now, I only teach suffering and the end of suffering." That's it. Not supernatural powers, not eternal life, not perfection. Just the simple and profound truth that suffering can end when we see clearly. So, when we talk about enlightenment, don't think of it as some distant peak that only a few can climb. Think of it as the gradual unfolding of clarity in your own life. Step by step, moment by moment, learning to meet reality as it is, without distortion, without clinging, without fear. This is the beginning of freedom. Not the kind of freedom that depends on circumstances, but the freedom of a mind that can rest, even in the middle of chaos. That is the heart of enlightenment, not becoming someone else, but finally seeing and living as things truly are. 2. Living an ordinary life, but free in the mind. When we think of enlightenment, many imagine someone who has left behind all the ordinary things of life. No more eating, sleeping, or feeling pain. But the truth is much simpler and far more beautiful. A person who is enlightened still eats when hungry, still feels the weight of the body, and yes, still experiences the sting of physical pain. But here's the difference. They no longer carry the second arrow. Let me explain. The Buddha once gave a powerful analogy. When life strikes us with pain, that's the first arrow, it's unavoidable. Illness, aging, disappointment, loss, these are part of being human. But then, most of us shoot ourselves with a second arrow, the arrow of mental suffering. We replay the moment in our minds. We resist. We complain. We ask, "Why me?" That second arrow is often far more painful than the first. An awakened person still feels the first arrow, but they don't add the second. Imagine being able to live with complete presence, eating your meal without the chatter of regret or anxiety, resting without guilt, walking without needing to be somewhere else. This is what freedom of mind looks like. It's not about escaping the world. It's about living fully within it, without being imprisoned by it. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you been caught not just by what happened, but by your reaction to it? Maybe someone criticized you, and instead of just hearing the words, you replayed them over and over in your head until they grew louder than they really were. Or maybe you felt a pain in your body, and instead of simply noticing it, your mind rushed ahead into fear. What if it's serious? What if it gets worse? That spiral of fear, that's the second arrow. Now imagine what it would feel like to stop shooting yourself with that arrow. To experience life as it is, joys and sorrows, without adding layers of resistance and judgment. This doesn't make you numb. In fact, it makes you more alive. Because when you are no longer tangled up in fear, anger, or clinging, your natural state of compassion, joy, and clarity shines through. This is why enlightened beings radiate peace. They're not escaping life. They're fully present in it. They can sit with pain without collapsing into despair. They can face difficulties without losing their center. They can love without fear of loss. Their hearts rest in compassion, in joy for the happiness of others, and in the wisdom that all things are changing, flowing, and free. And here's the encouraging part. You don't have to wait until you're fully enlightened to taste this freedom. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you let go of a grudge, every time you breathe deeply instead of spiraling into worry, you are practicing freedom. You are stepping closer to a mind that is spacious and unshaken. So the invitation is simple. Notice when you're adding the second arrow. Next time pain arises, ask yourself, am I just experiencing the first arrow, or am I also creating a second one in my mind? That awareness is the beginning of liberation. Because in the end, living an ordinary life with an extraordinary mind, that's what awakening is really about. 3. Freedom from self-attachment. When we talk about enlightenment, one of the most profound shifts is this: the letting go of the illusion of self. An awakened person still has a body, still feels sensations, still thinks thoughts, still remembers and acts just like you and me. But here's the difference. They no longer cling to the idea that all of this belongs to a solid me. Think of it like music flowing from a guitar. The sound is real, it vibrates, it moves you. But if you open the guitar, you won't find a little person inside strumming the strings. The music arises because of conditions, and then it fades. In the same way, our body, feelings, perceptions, and thoughts are like that music. They appear, they change, they pass. But there is no hidden self controlling it all. This doesn't mean an enlightened person disappears into nothingness. It means they stop being trapped by the heavy story of I, me, mine. And when that story loosens its grip, life becomes incredibly light. Imagine walking through your day without the constant burden of proving yourself, defending yourself, or fearing what will happen to me in the future. Imagine being free from replaying what I did wrong in the past. That is the kind of peace we're talking about. Let me ask you, how often do you get caught up in your identity? Maybe it's at work you think, I need to succeed so people respect me. Or in relationships you think, if they leave me, I'll be nothing. That constant grasping is exhausting, isn't it? And it's all built on the belief in a solid, unchanging self. But when we look closely, we see that what we call self is just a flow of experiences. Thoughts rising and falling, feelings shifting like weather, the body constantly changing at the cellular level. There's no single I to be found. When this truth is realized deeply, fear dissolves. The fear of death, the fear of loss, the fear of being judged, these lose their power. Because if there is no fixed self to defend, what is there to be afraid of? This doesn't make someone cold or detached. In fact, it makes them more compassionate. Without the walls of me and mine, they can embrace life and people with an open heart, without clinging or pushing away. This is why enlightened beings live with such ease. They don't need to escape to a cave or a mountain. Their freedom is within. They can face challenges without being chained to the past or trembling about the future. Their mind rests naturally in the present, flowing with compassion and wisdom, just like music flowing freely from an instrument. And here's the practical takeaway. You don't need to be fully enlightened to taste this freedom. Every time you loosen your grip on the story of me, you experience a little release. The next time you feel yourself caught in pride, or fear, or jealousy, pause and ask, what am I holding on to? Is this really me or just a passing thought? That simple question opens the door to freedom. Because in the end, enlightenment isn't about becoming someone else. It's about realizing that the someone we've been clinging to was never solid to begin with. And in that realization, there is a profound peace. 4. Freedom in the face of death. Death. It's a word that makes most of us uneasy. For many, it carries fear, uncertainty, and even a sense of final defeat. But for an enlightened being, death is not something to run from. It's not an enemy. It's simply the natural conclusion of a body that has served its time. Buddhism describes this as parinirvana, the final liberation. When the body of an awakened person dissolves, they enter what's called nirvana without remainder. And here's the beautiful part. This is not about falling into nothingness, nor about floating in some eternal heaven. It's something beyond all of our usual ideas of existence or non-existence. The Buddha used a powerful image to explain this. Imagine a flame burning brightly. When the fuel runs out, the flame doesn't go anywhere. It simply ceases because the conditions for it are gone. In the same way, for an enlightened being, when the causes of rebirth, the clinging, the cravings, the ignorance, are completely extinguished, there is no more returning to the endless cycle of birth and death. The wheel of suffering finally stops turning. Now, this can sound abstract, but let's bring it closer to our own lives. Think about how much energy we spend resisting the reality of death. We fear aging. We hide from the thought of illness. We cling tightly to possessions, relationships, even identities, as if they could protect us from the inevitable. And yet, no matter how much we resist, life moves forward, and change keeps coming. For the enlightened, death is not a cliff to fall from. It's more like a wave settling back into the ocean, peaceful, natural, complete. And that peace comes not from denying death, but from understanding life so deeply that there is no more fear. Here's something important. You don't need to be fully enlightened to begin tasting this freedom. Every time you accept change instead of fighting it, you practice freedom. Every time you release the tight grip of fear and choose presence instead, you are preparing your heart to meet death with openness rather than panic. Think about the last time you faced loss. Maybe the end of a relationship, the passing of someone you loved, or even the fading of your own youthful energy. If you noticed the pain but also saw the natural flow of things, if you found even a moment of peace inside that letting go, you've touched the same truth the Buddha pointed to. So what does this mean for us right now? It means we can live more courageously. When we remember that everything, including this body, will eventually pass, we stop wasting time on what doesn't matter. We love more fully because we know nothing lasts forever. We forgive more easily because grudges don't survive death. And we live with more gratitude because each moment is precious and fleeting. The ultimate freedom is not the denial of death. It's the understanding that death cannot touch what is already free. When clinging ends, fear ends. And in that space, life itself shines brighter, more alive than ever before. So, perhaps the real question isn't what happens when we die, but rather, how deeply can we live before we do? 5. Application in daily life. When we hear about enlightenment, it can sometimes feel far away, something reserved for monks in robes, sitting silently in distant temples. But here's the truth. The path to freedom isn't locked away on a mountain. It's available to us, right here, in the middle of our messy, busy, modern lives. Even if we are not fully enlightened, every single one of us can take steps that lead to peace. These steps are small, but they are powerful. They help reduce suffering, open our hearts, and create space for genuine happiness. Let's start with the first practice, letting go. So much of our pain comes from clinging to possessions, to people, to opinions, even to the image we hold of ourselves. And yet, everything we cling to is constantly changing. Think about it. The phone you hold today will one day break. The body you care for will eventually grow old. Even relationships, as precious as they are, shift with time. When we demand that life stay the same, we set ourselves up for disappointment. But when we learn to loosen our grip to appreciate without clinging, we begin to taste freedom. The second step is mindfulness, or living with awareness. This doesn't mean sitting cross-legged for hours every day, though meditation helps. It can be as simple as paying full attention to your morning coffee, feeling the warmth of the cup in your hands, noticing the aroma, and actually tasting the first sip instead of rushing through it. Mindfulness turns ordinary moments into sacred ones. And when challenges arise, anger, stress, or fear, mindfulness gives us a pause, a little space to respond with wisdom instead of reacting blindly. Then there is the practice of living ethically, what Buddhism calls the precepts. It may sound old-fashioned, but think about how much lighter life feels when we live with honesty, when we avoid harming others, when we choose kindness over cruelty. These are not just moral rules, they are tools for happiness. Every time we act with integrity, our mind becomes clearer, less restless, more at peace. And perhaps the most transformative practice of all is compassion. The world teaches us to compete, to protect ourselves, to put me first. But the heart knows another way. When we practice compassion, we soften the hard edges of our own suffering. We realize that everyone we meet is carrying invisible struggles. A kind word, a listening ear, a moment of patience. These are not small gestures. They ripple outward, touching lives in ways we may never see. And in giving compassion, we also receive it. Our heart grows lighter, freer, more alive. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds good, but life is stressful, complicated, overwhelming. And you're right. But the beauty of the Buddha's teaching is that it doesn't demand perfection. You don't have to transform overnight. All it asks is that you take one small step and then another. Maybe today, you choose to breathe deeply before responding in anger. Maybe tomorrow, you practice gratitude before bed. Over time, these small steps add up. They reshape the way we see ourselves, the way we see others, and the way we move through the world. And here's the most encouraging part. Even these little practices begin to reduce suffering right away. You don't have to wait for some distant future. The moment you let go of one grudge, you feel lighter. The moment you forgive yourself for one mistake, your heart softens. The moment you choose compassion over judgment, the world becomes a little more peaceful. This is what the path is about, not running away from life, but transforming the way we live it. Every mindful breath, every act of kindness, every step toward letting go is already a taste of enlightenment. So ask yourself, what is one small thing you can do today to bring more peace into your life? Maybe it's as simple as pausing before rushing into your next task. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who needs to hear they are not alone. Or maybe it's just smiling at the stranger who walks by. The path to freedom doesn't begin in the future. It begins right now, in this very breath. Summary of key points and reflections. So, let's take a moment to bring everything together. When we talk about enlightenment, it's easy to imagine something far away, almost supernatural, like becoming a saint or disappearing into the sky. But Buddhism shows us a very different truth. Enlightenment is not about escaping life. It's about seeing life clearly. It's about recognizing the roots of our suffering, craving, anger, ignorance, and learning how to let them go. An enlightened person still walks, eats, laughs, and faces the ups and downs of life just like anyone else. But there's a profound difference. They are no longer chained by suffering. They don't live under the constant pressure of protecting a fragile ego or clinging to things that are always changing. Imagine living with that kind of freedom, where the noise of comparison, fear, and endless wanting simply loses its grip on you. Even death, which for most of us is the deepest fear, becomes something else entirely. For the awakened mind, death is not an enemy. It's not something to run from or dread. It's simply the natural closing of a chapter, the end of conditions coming together. Nothing to fear, nothing to fight, just a quiet return to silence. And here's the most important part. This path isn't reserved for monks on mountaintops or spiritual masters. It's for you. It's for me. It's for anyone who takes one small, honest step toward awareness. You don't have to wait for the perfect time. You don't need to transform overnight. Enlightenment begins with something as simple as one mindful breath. Right here, right now. It begins with letting go, maybe just a little. Letting go of the need to always be right. Letting go of the story that you're not enough. Letting go of the grudge that's been sitting heavy in your chest. Each time you release something, no matter how small, you taste freedom. It also begins with compassion. Maybe today, instead of rushing past, you choose to pause and truly listen to someone who's hurting. Or you show kindness to yourself when your mind stumbles back into old habits. Compassion is not weakness, it's strength, because it melts away the walls that separate us from one another. So here is the real lesson. Enlightenment is not a final destination waiting at the end of some distant road. It is a way of being, lived moment by moment. Every breath is a chance to awaken. Every act of letting go is a step into freedom. Every gesture of compassion is a glimpse of what it means to live beyond fear. If you remember only one thing from today, let it be this. Freedom isn't out there. It's here, now, in the way you choose to meet this very moment. So maybe, after this video ends, take a single mindful breath. Notice it fully. Feel how life flows in and out of you. And in that breath, realize you've already begun.